Dear students, in my lecture, I try to offer a critical appraisal of Matthew Arnold's celebrated poem, Dover Beach. The poem was first published in 1867 in the New Poems. Matthew Arnold's poetry is the poetry of a critic. His very definition of poetry as the criticism of life under the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty prevents him from rising to those imaginative heights where all criticism melts away in the glowing light of beauty. Romanticism in Arnold manifests in the form of pensive melancholy over the frustration of life. We discover a kind of nostalgia of the soul, restrained expression of despair in his poetry. Despite all his pessimism, he is a stoic. He was a lover of nature, but his mood was quiet and subdued. Arnold uses nature as a convenient background of human thought. In Dover Beach, the sea is the mirror of his soul, where he sees the deepest reflection of his own melancholy and sense of isolation. We find in his style classical restraint, lucidity, and grace. There is in him no exuberance of passion and extravagance of imagination that we find in Shelley, Keats, Tennyson, or Browning. Dover Beach is one of the brightest gems in the history of English poetry. It is the one work, says J.D. Jump, by which Arnold ought to appear in even the briefest anthology of great English poems. In Dover Beach, Matthew Arnold is a critic of life in the abstract. He is urbane, detached, with sincerity and serenity. In Dover Beach, there is lucidity and a faculty of sympathetic interpretation which gives much value to the poem. Elegance, wistfulness, sincerity of his outlook are peculiarly individual. A gracious sympathy pervades the whole poem. But in analyzing Dover Beach, it must be noted carefully, and you must also note it carefully, that in the poem there is no luxury of grief, no sentimental pessimism. The serenity which we find in the poem is the serenity of a troubled but brave spirit. He is serene, but not tranquil. He is not at rest. He felt the intellectual difficulties of his time, but could never quite escape their disturbing atmosphere. Arnold was not an escapist. Within its short compass, Dover Beach brings to light the main movement of the mind of the last quarter of a century. The poem opens with a beautiful description of the landscape. The sea is calm and quiet. The tide is full under the moonlight. The moon is lying on the French coast and would disappear soon. The cliffs of Dover stand glimmering on the tranquil bay. Each time the waves retreat and roll forward again. They toss the pebbles and produce a slow sound of eternal sadness. The waves remind us of time and change. The sights and sounds in the opening picture develop the lines of the dramatic monologue. It goes without saying that the description has a pictorial quality and at the same time the miserable plight of human existence without faith. Sophocles also long ago heard the same note of sadness and melancholy. Arnold is of the view that like the sea, which is at full tide tonight, faith too was in the past at its full. But now the poet sees faith retreating from society. In the concluding stanzas, the poet laments over the loss of man's faith in religion. It is painful to see that the society is suffering from the malady of doubt, disbelief, destruction, and fear. He compares the world to a battlefield where men are like a band of soldiers fighting on a dark plain. The pessimism of the last 8 lines is hardly to be paralleled in literature. It surpasses even that of Thomas Hardy, the prince among the pessimistic writers. The lines give a fine poetic expression to Arnold's melancholy, which borders on stark pessimism. The image of the battle by night, with friends and foe confused in the darkness, is an apt comment on the modern world. And it is an established fact that Dover Beach is remarkable for its use of imagery. It is noticeable that Arnold in the last stanza changes the metaphor. Dear students, Dover Beach reveals Arnold's melancholy note, quintessential expression of melancholy. In Dover Beach, we find beautiful and poignant illustration of Arnold's characteristic attitude to nature. It is the quiet and subdued moods of nature, her silence, moonlight and sunlight, sound of the retreating sea, that Arnold loved so much so that the sea became the one element in which he discovered his own melancholy and sense of isolation. The opening of Dover Beach opens the doors of setting and the emotional background of so much Arnold's elegiac meditation. Dover Beach is the one completely successful poem. Dover Beach is a perfect expression of Arnold's introspection and matter-of-fact attitude. It is Dover Beach which shows the poet's personal involvement and concern for tradition and the loss of faith. Considering all the features, we can safely say that Dover Beach strikes a modern note. Dear students, here are some suggestive questions, the answer of which you must write in your own language. I think it will help you to understand the poem clearly. Number 1. Dover Beach is a short poem, but it embraces a great range and depth of significance. Discuss. 2. Attempt a critical analysis of Arnold's Dover Beach and comment on the dominant mood of the poem. 3. Comment on Arnold's response to the Victorian age in Dover Beach. 4. Show how Arnold expresses his despair and melancholy with remarkable restraint in Dover Beach. There are some short questions. 1. Comment briefly, why are the last 8 lines of the poem significant? 2. Who is Sophocles? 3. In which year Dover Beach was published? 4. What is meant by the Sea of Faith? Dover Beach is remarkable for its use of imagery. Comment briefly. Thank you.